Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. Let's get into it. Today, I want to talk about resistance as defined by Steven Pressfield in The War of Art. This is a topic we've discussed before, but I want to talk specifically around a tactic to overcoming resistance that has made a significant difference in my personal and my business life. So Steven Pressfield, in his book, The War of Art, great book, short read. We've talked about it on the podcast before. He talks extensively about this concept he calls resistance. And resistance is this inner force that prevents us from pursuing our goals, our passions, whatever endeavors we may have. It can show up in a number of different forms. Maybe it's in procrastination. Maybe it shows up as self-doubt. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's just distractions. But bottom line is it prevents us from taking the first step towards our objective, towards our goals. So Pressfield in his book suggests that one of the key ways to overcoming resistance, the one that I think is absolutely most important, and it's something that I've recently experienced, which is why we're talking about it. Pressfield suggests that the key to overcoming resistance is to just get started. And what he means is just the act of initiating the work or taking the very first step towards your goal, just doing that, because that is usually the most challenging step or part. It's also the most crucial. It's the most crucial part of the process. So just getting started, getting moving, and letting things occur or take shape. He encourages you, if you want to overcome resistance, just go. Just get started. Now, why? Why should you just get started? Number one, resistance is strongest at the very beginning. All of us know this. Oftentimes when we get into things, it becomes easier, but just getting started is hard. And why? It's because resistance is so damn strong at the beginning. It tends to actually be at its peak when you're just going to start a project. This is when that self-doubt, this is when the fear, this is when the other forms of resistance can be most paralyzing. And the longer that you delay to get started, the stronger the resistance actually feels, kind of becomes, right? So we've got to just get started, recognizing that resistance is strongest at the start. Once we get started, though, what happens? Momentum. Inertia. Once you begin and you get yourself in motion, it creates a sense of momentum. You get started, you create momentum, then what happens? You build confidence. You build confidence because you're taking that first step. And when you take that first step, it boosts our confidence and begins to diminish this resistance, this power of resistance. And as you see progress and you overcome some of the initial hurdles, you gain a sense of accomplishment. And the confidence builds and the momentum builds. Now, when you get started and you build this momentum and you gain confidence, you start to see somewhat of a routine and a discipline take shape. You're starting to regularly kind of create a routine, or you're establishing a routine, I should say. And in doing so, it can help develop a discipline. So over time, discipline can become a powerful force against resistance. It's like building the moat around your world, right? Discipline is what keeps the resistance from coming back. So you get started, you overcome the resistance at the start, you create momentum and inertia, you build confidence, and that leads to routine and discipline. And then lastly, when you get rolling, you start to get into a creative flow. The most significant insights, the ideas, the creativity, they emerge once you're actively engaged in whatever you're working on. Anybody that's ever put together a presentation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, that's why this topic came up for me today. I started working on a number of presentations that I had coming up. And I'll tell you what, I had a really difficult time getting started. I was thinking through, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to say it? What do I want to convey? And I never just sat down and started writing. But once I, forced myself to sit in front of a blank screen and just start making an outline, I started to pick up speed. I started to build some momentum. I started to feel better. Like all these ideas started coming to me. I had more confidence. I started getting into a rhythm or a routine. And then I became so focused, I didn't look at anything else but the presentations for a long, long period of time. And as a result, I think I put together some pretty strong content. But what was the hardest part? Just sitting down, just getting started. So in essence, what I'm trying to convey today is just getting started. It's a call to action. It encourages you to push past resistance and take a critical first step towards your goal. Resistance can be difficult to overcome, but it loses its power once you begin working. So the focusing question for you today: what is it that you've been procrastinating around? What is it that you know you've got to get done, but you have some self-doubt or some fear? Can you, immediately after listening to this podcast today, sit down and start? Maybe it's mapping out a new business strategy. Maybe it is writing a presentation. Maybe it's mapping out a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe instead of sitting down for that conversation, why don't we prepare for it? Bottom line is, how can we just get started? If we get started, magical things start to happen. So the focusing question: what have you been delaying on, and what should you get started on right now? Steve Pressfield was an author. What he oftentimes was referring to was writing, like physically writing a book or a manuscript or whatever it may be. And he was famous for saying, the best way to get creative is to just sit down and write. Like, just go to work. Like, he was most inspired when he just sat down and forced himself to write. Like, in other words, the inspiration came. He didn't have the inspiration first and then went to sit down. He sat down, began to write junk, but through that gained momentum and inspiration. So where do you need to apply that in your world? That's the focusing question. That's all we have today. The No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.